We have a very special guest today, Sarah Walsh, who is a property lawyer who does all the conveyancing in relation to property. Thank you, Sarah, for coming here today to join us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sarah Walsh is a Sydney-based property lawyer renowned for her expertise in providing top-notch conveyancing and leasing services for residential, commercial, and retail properties. With over 10 years of specialized experience, Sarah has honed her skills to become a leading expert in these fields, consistently delivering high-level customer experience.
So yes, I'm a property lawyer, just coming up to 15 years experience now. And I've only ever done property law. I used to be in retail and commercial, do more retail and commercial work, and these days I'm probably more focused on residential.
So how did you get into what you're doing? What's that journey been like?
It's been quite a long one, actually. So I started out as a paralegal, and in that in that role, I started to get a lot of experience in conveyancing, and that's when I decided to become a property lawyer. I was always property obsessed. I love what I do. I love that I'm involved in the process, and especially being involved in someone's journey, purchasing, finding that property, all the way through to settlement. My favorite part of the job is calling someone at settlement to say, congratulations, your settlement has completed. You can now pick up your keys, especially if that's going to be that person's home.
It's such a rewarding feeling from both fronts, from exchange right through to settlement, and knowing that you've made a difference. In saying that, what services do you provide your clients?
So from a purchasing perspective, we start by doing an intake with them, understanding what it is that they're looking for and what's important to them. Some people are risk takers and some people are not. Some things that are important to people is they're wanting to build on a property. So we try to get a really good understanding of what it is that they're looking to purchase, so that when we start by doing the contract reviews for them or providing them with advice, we can tailor that advice to their personal circumstances, or to the property that it is that they're looking to purchase. So on a purchasing front, we start by reviewing the contract. If it's a strata, we'll look at the strata report for them as well and identify any red flags that might be in the strata report. Then from there, we negotiate the contract terms with the other side to make sure the rights are balanced under the contract. We also ask additional questions in relation to the property. So some are standard and some may come from the purchaser's circumstances, or just individual inquiries about the property that have come from their own inspections. Then once we've negotiated the contract terms, the purchaser, if they have a buyer's agent, will negotiate the price through the buyer's agent. Otherwise, the purchaser will negotiate directly with the agent regarding price. And then we attend to exchange of contracts, and then we go through to the conveyancing side.
Have you had any interesting amendment requests? Because I've got one.
Yeah.
I had one amendment that was sent through, and the request was, has there been any paranormal activity within the property? How do
How would you answer that? What would you say?
With the standard response, the vendor is not aware.
Imagine if you replied with, yes, actually, there was a ghost, but they've moved on.
So bizarre. Has there been anything unique
Oh,
on your end?
I really wish that I had. Probably the more unique circumstances come from like items remaining at the property. There's a lot of disputes. Like, you're spending millions of dollars on a property, and a lot of disputes always seem to arise around, was that particular pot plant included in the sale?
What's the difference between a property lawyer and a conveyancer?
The hex debt.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Oh, okay.
There's not a huge difference between a conveyancer, a property lawyer, and a lawyer when it comes to the conveyancing process. Property and conveyancers were born out of the lawyer's role. So traditionally, only lawyers could complete a conveyance.
Okay.
And then in the 1990s, conveyancers, the profession was introduced. But traditionally, it was always done by by lawyers. The conveyancers are trained to do the conveyance, to buy and sell property and to act in that transaction, where lawyers might be able to add a little bit more flavour, is when the transactions kind of go outside the standard or norm. So maybe when companies are involved, if it's a sale by a deceased estate, a lawyer might be better equipped to prepare the contract and the contract terms. It's a little bit more complex transaction, then a property lawyer might be able to do a little bit more than what a conveyancer can do in relation to preparing, negotiating contract terms and protecting the parties' interests.
When should a buyer engage yourself?
Once they've got their finances sorted, so if they've got pre-approval and they're actively looking to find a property, that's a great time to start speaking to a property lawyer or a conveyancer. Even before then, it's fine to engage a property lawyer or conveyancer. Even if they're just in the process of looking, we can be a great central point for them to give them advice about who they need to speak to next or what they need to do next, if whether or not they should speak to a buyer's agent. I would definitely always recommend that to a client, particularly if they're time poor or if they're struggling to find that ideal property in the budget that they're looking for. So we could be a really good central point and help manage that whole process for them. So do not leave it till last minute. When you leave it to the last minute, the problem is that you're opening yourself up to risk because you don't have as much ability to negotiate contract terms. Maybe you can't make all of those additional property inquiries that you would have made had you had the advice of a solicitor or conveyancer up front. So there's more risk that the later that you leave it.
In order to ensure that the buyer engages the right property lawyer or solicitor, what main questions should the buyer be asking?
Firstly, I would definitely say find a conveyancer or a property lawyer that you can talk to, that you're happy to ask questions. If you feel when you're calling to speak to them, if you feel really rushed, like they're trying to rush you to get you off the phone, they're probably not going to be the right person to deal with your matter. So the first thing would just be that personality to see if they're a good fit for you. In terms of questions, how quickly can they turn around a contract review? Getting that initial contract review done is essential. You'd kind of want them to turn it around at least within 24 hours. If they're going to take half a week, then you could lose out on a property if they can't do it within that time frame. And I would say that that's probably where a lot of my work does come from too, is from people that have been burned from their conveyancer.
Yeah.
Because their conveyancer wouldn't answer their phone calls, return their emails, continue negotiations as required. So I'd say communication is probably the number one thing. The other thing is you want to make sure that the person you're dealing with has a decent level of experience. Smaller law firms will delegate property conveyancing work to a junior lawyer. When they do that, you get a very poor experience because the junior lawyer doesn't know exactly how to handle a conveyancing matter or how to handle a conveyancing matter when things start to go astray. So asking what kind of experience the conveyancer has and whether or not they will be handling your transaction from start to end. That's a really good question too. In our firm, I look after everything before and up to when contracts exchange, and then I have a very experienced conveyancer. I think she has nearly 20 years experience looking after from exchange through to settlement, and I am always still there to help her or to assist in any way. But sometimes people offshore settlement conveyance.
I heard that's a thing.
It's very much a thing these days. Yeah, a lot of people think that conveyancing, like that end part of the conveyancing transaction is really, really standard, but it's not.
Do you mind just talking our viewers through what the settlement process looks like? Because I know that we've moved to a new system and a new way of doing things where you don't have to show up and do like a physical settlement between you and another lawyer. It all happens virtually now.
PEX is an online workspace where the vendor's conveyancer, the purchaser's conveyancer, and the banks all meet. And the system is connected to the Land Titles Office. It's connected to Revenue New South Wales. It connects everything that we need in order to complete the settlement. And inside that PEXA settlement workspace, the purchaser uploads and the bank uploads all of their source funds to pay for the property, and then the vendor makes payment directions to to probably their bank or to discharge their mortgage. So it all happens in one central location, and throughout the conveyancing process, that's where a lot of the communication between the parties start having, that's where it kind of communicates with each other.
So why do delayed settlements happen?
Oh, delayed settlements. Oh, wow. Where do I start?
Like, what are some common reasons that, you know, prospective buyers and sellers need to be mindful of?
Vacant possession, I would say, would be one. So if a vendor fails to provide vacant possession, that means getting rid of all of their, furniture, equipment, everything from inside the property, or maybe getting rid of the tenant. If the tenant refuses to leave, that would be a failed settlement. It can be a failed settlement if the banks aren't ready. So if the banks haven't been notified within the specified timeframes and updated, sometimes like in terms of an incoming mortgagee, then they need all of their loan documents to be completed. Sometimes as well, between all of the parties, something that could happen, and I'm actually dealing with it at the moment, is with a change of name. A change of name sets off like this domino effect. It will usually arise because someone's been married since they first purchased the property, and their name has changed, they've taken on their husband's name. Adding and removing people from the contract is a lot more difficult because you need a lot more consents. So you need the input of the bank as well. One good thing about conveyancing transactions is generally everyone's trying to achieve the same thing. Everyone just wants settlement to happen. So because of that, we all work towards and assist each other. All parties assist each other to get it across the line. So if contract amendments are required, we usually see that people are being really lenient with accepting those contract amendments.
Any red flags that a buyer should avoid that you can share?
Sometimes, especially with deceased estates, might see a clause in a contract that says gives the vendor the ability to extend the settlement date, or gives the vendor the ability to terminate the contract if certain events don't happen. That's a really big red flag. Any terms in the contract that give the ability to the vendor to terminate the contract is a red flag. We need to put parameters and safety nets around it to make sure that the purchaser's risks are protected. Those clauses usually come up with deceased estate. It might be a dissolution of marriage, so a divorce, or it could be an off-the-plan matter. We usually see those types of clauses in those contracts.
Yeah. How do you feel about a release of deposit clause?
Prefer it to be out.
Yeah.
But overall, I think the risk involved in release of deposit clauses can be reduced or minimized. Just say the deposit can only be released for certain reasons and can only be released to certain trust accounts. So as long as we put safety measures around a release of deposit clause, it shouldn't be a problem. If the vendor needs it, they need it. You're not going to be able, you'll just have to purchase the property with that clause in there.
And another common clauses we see is obviously penalty interest, and what that, most conveyancers try and reduce that where they can. But also around land tax being adjusted and not adjusted.
Yeah. I was acting for a vendor who was selling a property, and he wanted the property to be subject to land tax adjustment. And not ordinarily a purchaser will request that adjustment not be made. In this case, it was a house. Land tax adjustment was $40,000.
Wow.
And they didn't get their conveyancer or property lawyer to review the contract beforehand. And so they'd signed the contract with the land tax adjustment, and we're required to pay an extra $40,000 as settlement.
Now, final question. What piece of advice can you share for anyone that's looking to buy or sell?
I think having a great mortgage broker, having a great buyer's agent, having a great conveyancer or property lawyer on your team, if you get the right advice, then it protects you not just through the conveyancing process, it protects your finances, it protects your future interests in the property. I can't stress enough how essential it is to get the right advice, because unwinding things is very costly, very expensive if you make the wrong purchasing choice.
You're spot on. Having the A team to protect your best interests is really important and crucial.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us.
Yeah.
And we look forward to the next one.
Yeah. And if anyone's looking for a great property lawyer, please contact Sarah Walsh.
Thank you so much.
Link in description.